Hey, what is up, guys? Hazy Aim is here. Got another Timothy Kane reaction video. I actually love watching Tim's content that he puts out. He talks about the video game industry as a whole and kind of things he went through in game development. He was involved in some of the Fallout games, Outer Worlds, and a few early titles that I never played. But without further ado, we're going to see what he has to say about bosses and how the gaming industry does bosses or how they should do bosses, and kind of get his input on that. So let's get going.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about bosses. And not me, even though I'm a boss. Yo. I don't know why I did that. Matthew Bazin6432 asks, I would like to hear more of your thoughts on bosses and other special NPCs. In other words, how have games handled and how could they handle these enemies in unique and interesting ways? I think I talked about this a little in a Q&A I did a few months ago, but you know what? Let's just do a whole video on it because they're interesting. Bosses are interesting. They're interesting encounters to me. For me, as a designer, a boss is a place where the designer is talking right to the player and going, okay, you think you've learned how to play? Huh? Well, bring it because we're going to rumble.
Starting right off the bat here, I 100% agree with that. When you fight a boss, it should feel like a boss. Like, there's quite a few games where you go in and you fight a boss and you're just kind of underwhelmed. You're just like, really? That's it? Like, that was the boss? You know, and on the flip side, there's games where you go and you're like, holy shit, like, this boss is crazy. Like, there's all sorts of stuff I have to do and think about. So, yeah, I mean, bosses are very important in a video game for sure.
Generally. Now, it's interesting. I didn't plan to use them in the Outer Worlds. In fact, I told Charlie Staples, the
This
lead
is kind of
designer, I
interesting
said, I
here.
don't really want to use bosses. We can have varying levels of encounters. I still want the roller coaster experience that I talked about in the pacing video, but I didn't really want bosses per se. We did end up with some tougher encounters, and we did end the game with a boss, but I'll talk about why we did that in a bit. So let's talk about bosses in general, because bosses are a little different than regular encounters in that they're always hand placed, or almost always. I can't think of a game that has a randomly appearing boss. And the boss themselves is.
That is a good point. I as well cannot think of a game that has a boss just kind of randomly appear, or hand placed, I guess is the better word to use, like he said. I can't think of a game where they aren't hand placed, where it's just like a random encounter, like completely random. Yeah, I don't know. That would be interesting though. That would definitely be an interesting design. But I think having them hand placed in the development process of where they're going to be is probably the best model, at least in my opinion. The random bosses would be interesting, but I don't know how you'd be able to pull that off.
Are specially designed, and so is their environment. And because of that, even before you meet the boss, the designers should have telegraphed things to you. There should be warnings. NPCs alone should be like, oh, don't go in there. You know, there's a Gorgon that will turn you to stone, or don't go in there. You know, there's something that breathes poisonous gas. Things for you to go, I wonder if I have anything to defend against that kind of thing. Also, and I know you've all played a game where you walk into a room full of heal potions and ammo, and you're like, ooh. And you can almost
Oh
hear the
yeah.
designer going,
There's quite a few games that are like this that I've played. The one that comes to mind first is Doom. Like in Doom, you could always tell, like when you're about to go up against some big bad boss, they'd fill the room with like armor and health pluses and ammo, maybe a gun that they think you might have missed on like the last level. And with that, there'd also be a lot of times like an autosave when you're in that room or past that room. So yeah, definitely for sure can definitely tell in most games that there's going to be a boss.
Watch out. And the first thing you do is save. I've even had rooms like that auto save. You walk into a room and it's auto save.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
like, oh, I know something's about to go down. That's something that's very boss encountery that you don't see on other encounters. But the main thing I'm saying is before bosses are even introduced to the player, there's all kinds of things that happen in the game for the player to learn about it. To learn like what kind of boss it is, what might happen when you encounter this boss, so you can prepare and be ready for it. Bosses, more than anything, there are really there to test your mettle.
I agree. I do like games that give you like hints, whether it be talking to an NPC when you're getting close to the boss, or writings on the wall, or a voice that starts talking about something. And it doesn't even have to be like a direct hint. I'd almost prefer it not to be a direct hint. Like it shouldn't be so direct as to say this boss would really be hurt by fire. Like no, it'd be like this boss is made of water. Maybe something hot would. And even that's almost too generic and too easy to figure out. A way to do like a riddle, to be like, you go in, you fight the boss a few times, and you're like, oh, let me think about that riddle. And you're like, oh shit, I'm an idiot. Like, duh. So I do like that, but you can't make it super easy.
Have you figured out how to play this game? Because this is going to be a hard encounter, and you don't want that to be a surprise. So
So I mean, he says this right, and I feel like he said a hard encounter. I feel like there's so many games that have bosses that just aren't hard encounters. To get to games where I feel like it has a very challenging boss and learning curve would be like the Dark Souls games, Elden Ring, Bloodborne. Those games have a higher learning curve than say playing, I don't know, what's a game with easy bosses like every other game out there. I mean, like Doom's bosses weren't too terribly difficult. Um, I just, uh, yeah, I mean, there has to be some sort of challenge to the boss, especially if it's the end game boss.
so for now, boss fights are usually fights. Now we've gotten around that. I mean, Fallout had the encounter with the master, and this is a spoiler, but guess what? It's a 25-year-old game. The master, you could literally talk out of fighting you, but you had to have done things before
See,
that.
I
You
think
couldn't
this
just
is
have a
pretty
high
cool.
speech skill. So yes, some boss encounters don't always end in fighting, but let's say 99% of them do. And let's talk about that. So the first thing you have to think about is how do you handle the non-combat PCs? Because not every player is going to make a PC with all his points in combat skills.
That's
So
true.
let's talk about
That's
the two
true.
major ways around that, and actually three in Outer Worlds. So your stealth character, there's all kinds of things you can do to help a stealth character survive a boss encounter, and one of them is have them use their stealth skills to prepare for the encounter. Maybe there's a room that is locked, and when you go in, they find some special equipment that will debuff.
See, I really like this idea too because this opens up the potential for replay. Because say you go through and you put like all your points in combat and doing damage and defense, and then your play experience is a little different because of the way you built your character. And the stealth player's experience through the game is different because of the way he built his character. So as far as replayability and each player experiencing something a little different, I do like that.
The boss, or maybe there's a lever that turns on environmental hazards in the room the boss is in to to kind of reduce their hit points or something that basically makes the encounter a little easier for the stealth player. And it's a tip of the hat that we know you haven't spent all your points in combat, but you did spend points in stealth. And how do we know that? You're in this room that required lockpick or disarm trap or sneak. You needed something to get in here. Similarly, with a
100%,
dialogue-based
100%.
character, maybe there's a way in combat to debuff the boss. Maybe there are dialogue skills that debuff them, or maybe you can talk an NPC into coming with you because he's like a well-known, Gorgon hunter, and you're like, "Hey, I'm going in to fight that Gorgon. Why don't you come along?" And they're like,
I do like that idea too as well. I think that'd be really cool to put in games. Just another way of rewarding that player for investing those points into speech, and every different avenue you take brings you to different ways to beat the game and complete the game, and different experiences between your straight like fighter or warrior guy class that's going into the game.
like you have a high speech skill. They're like, okay, and they come along. So now that helps you. They're not just extra hit points and extra damage. If you're a dialogue character, you probably need that help. And then for Outer Worlds, we had the leadership skill, which is you're not necessarily good at talking, but you have your companions are better. That's what will help you in the boss encounter. Your companions can do their special attacks more
See, that's
frequently.
cool too, man.
They do
You
more
need to make
damage.
some games, some more games.
Whatever it is about your leadership skill that
Timothy
improve your
Kane.
companions will certainly come in handy in a boss fight. So those are all the things that happen before you ever encounter the boss, and that's something that's unique to a boss because you know they're coming. The actual fight with the boss themselves, many people think of bosses, oh, they have extra hit points, they have a lot of hit points, and they have a lot of different attack modes.
That's most bosses
That's
in most
true.
video games.
That's part of it. But I think there's a lot of ways to think about bosses beyond just the boss. For example, the boss might have helpers. The boss might have easier creatures that come along that also attack you. This is great for any of the player abilities that are AoE, because it's a chance to use them and it's a chance to wipe out these things. Often they are part of a chain. So you do some sweep attack and take out a lot of the helpers, then you can do a power attack on the boss. That's a perfect example of abilities that need to power up. I've played games where every time you kill something, it goes into a bar that powers some big ability. So what you do is when a strategy when you encounter a boss is to quickly kill all the little helper creatures, which powers up your big mega ability that you use on the boss. Also, some games, when they recognize that there are builds that aren't combat oriented, will let you convert those helpers over to you. Maybe you mind control them.
Oh, that's a pretty sweet concept right there. Once you defeat them, you can mind control them. And now they're part of your force. That is really cool. I like that a lot. Man, this guy has so many great ideas. I feel like all the major gaming development studios need to watch this video about bosses. There's so many trash boss fights out there.
Maybe you convince them they're fighting on the wrong side, whatever you want to do, and suddenly some of those helpers for the boss turn into helpers for you, and they turn on their boss. That's always super fun, and it's memorable, and it uses something your player is made for. The big thing I mentioned in the Q&A video was bosses should usually go through stages, and that's something that doesn't happen in normal encounters. It happens in boss encounters, where the boss, as they go through different stages, and I know in World of Warcraft they even tell you this. They sometimes do like stage 2.
Oh yeah, yep. Phase 2.
The boss may
Phase
physically
3.
change. He certainly gains new abilities or movement mode. Suddenly maybe he's flying. So
I do like that when games make the boss change forms, and now he's like going all crazy with different abilities or whatever. Even if he or she changes multiple times, that's a good boss fight.
have to attack him with ranged, or maybe he suddenly gets a AoE attack weapon. He suddenly can breathe gas or breathe fire. These are all different stages that bosses go through that keep the player on their toes and makes them adapt. That you can't come in with your one ability and use it, because the boss is going to go through stages. In Temple of Elemental Evil, again, this is going to be spoilers for a 22-year-old game, Zuggtmoy at some point would offer to surrender. And depending on your alignment and what you've done previously in the game and what your speech skills are, you can manipulate that. You can either say no and keep fighting, or you can surrender to Zuggtmoy, or you can have Zuggtmoy surrender.
See, that is another thing that's really cool. Like, that is a cool concept. I haven't seen that in too many games. Where you're fighting them and then they offer to surrender. Oh, well, I guess I've seen it in a few games, but not many to where they would actually join you.
Surrender to you and become a follower of yours. It's a really cool way, I think, of handling a boss in a way that you rarely see that. Like,
Yeah,
come out
he's
of a boss
right.
room
You
with the
rarely
boss,
see
and
that,
the boss
yeah.
works for you.
That's sweet.
We couldn't
That's
handle
a
that,
sweet
unfortunately,
concept.
in Temple, so that was handled in cutscenes and end slides. But those are the kind of bosses that are super memorable. Everyone's killed the dragon. How many people came out of that mountain riding the dragon and having a new mount?
Dude, that would be game changing. That is such an awesome idea. Going fighting the dragon and coming out riding him. Now you guys are going into battle together. That is so cool.
The name dragon. That's cool, and that's
That
something
is
you can
cool.
you can. If you haven't seen, that's something people should do. Also, because bosses tend to be placed, like I said, I don't think of a lot of randomly encountered bosses. The room itself can go through stages, and that's something I've seen.
Yeah,
in different games,
yeah.
where
World of Warcraft does that for
the room
sure.
itself changes over time. Maybe there are hazards. Maybe they're not there and they start up, or maybe they're there but they move. Maybe they're there and they change type. They go from being electrical to acid, and that's again something to keep the player on their toes, to make them have to adapt to that new change. Also, sometimes blockers appear, like columns will rise up or shields will appear, and you have to deal with it. You have to get them, knock them down, or you have to move position, or you just have to change your tactics. Also, paths to things that can help you or hurt the boss can suddenly appear. Maybe all of a sudden these columns shoot up, and at the top of them are levers that can spray acid on the boss. But you have to
Okay,
double jump to get
okay.
there. Players who never took double jump are like, I guess I just keep fighting the boss. But all the double jump players are like, woohoo, I'm spraying acid.
That's cool. That is cool.
And then I already kind of touched on it with you leaving with the boss. There's a lot of things that make boss encounters memorable that happen after you're done. They're post-boss things.
Yep.
Because people
for
want
sure.
some kind of change beyond
100%
just
agree.
a base reward, like here's a +1 sword and here's a bunch of coins or something. They want something that's like, I took on a boss. Maybe it's a reputation. Maybe you're known as the Gorgon Slayer, and now there's a new greeting people have when you walk around the world. That's really cool. Maybe you get a special item from them that gets reactions from people. In Arcanum, we had armor that made people do a special greeting, and they could tag the armor. The armor basically looked so scary that you would get a different greeting out of people you meet in towns.
That's cool.
That would we really wanted that. We put that in, planning to use it on boss encounters. There might even be a world state change. Maybe this entire zone was foggy or stormy.
I've seen that before in games where like the whole world changes. Like you go in and you're fighting the god of lightning, and it's currently thunderstorming and raining and stuff outside. And then when you beat him and you come back outside, it's all bright and shiny and butterflies are flying in rainbows. Well, it's kind of a weird spot to stop him out. My bad, Timothy Kane.
And then when you kill the boss and come out, it's not that way anymore, and people are going, "Yay, go you!" Or like I said, the only way to get a named dragon mount is to go kill a boss dragon, or almost kill, and then they surrender and they become your mount. These are all things that a boss can provide. That is really especially cool because it's a boss. It wasn't just something that randomly dropped. It's something that you went in with the intention of getting, and once you get, people know what you did. So it kind of changes the world.
It's like a trophy.
That's something that's really cool and special. And
trophy
unique.
and a mount.
Almost unique. Let's not say unique. It's something that's very associated with bosses.
Yes.
So that's my idea on bosses. The pre, during, and post boss experience, and why I think
All
those are
right,
different
guys.
than regular encounters, and how I think you can step up your boss game.
That was Timothy Kane. Check his YouTube channel out. I don't know him personally. I just kind of started watching his videos because he has a lot of interesting viewpoints on video game development. if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Have a good day wherever you're at in the world, either night or day. Much love. And I'm currently playing Alan Wake 2, so there will be a review coming up there. I'm about 8 hours in currently. I might end up doing a first impressions and then get a final verdict going. But hey, the video is getting kind of lengthy here, longer than I like to get, but I hope you enjoyed and have a good night.